2, 1.
BBC Radio Bristol.
John Darvall.
Bristol appears to be a green city, a former European green capital. It feels green, doesn't it? But it may not be as green as you think. Of the 70 councillors that make up Bristol City Council, only 11 of them are Greens. There's never been a Green mayor. The closest thing we had to that was George Ferguson, but he was independent. The city has failed to return a Green MP, coming second in last December's general election in Bristol West. A poor second at that. Maybe that is because the Green message isn't clear. Maybe it's because the Green Party, as a party in the UK, needs better leadership. Maybe it needs somebody like Cllr Cleo Lake, who is a voice on many different fronts and campaigns. And Cleo joins me on the line now. Afternoon, Cleo.
Good afternoon, John.
Good to talk to you. Lots to talk about, but I want to talk about you and the Greens, because you're a fairly new member of the party, aren't you?
Well, it's been, I think, just over 5 years now, so I don't think that's terribly new. It's a reasonable time.
A reasonable time, because you were joined the party in 2015, became a councillor in 2016. What made you join the Greens?
Well, it's a party that I usually vote for. It's a party that my mum would vote for when I was growing up. And actually, it was coming into contact with a councillor in 2012 who supported some of us to do the Windrush mural, actually, in St Paul's. Mm-hmm. It was a difficult year because it was the year St Paul's Carnival was cancelled. So that was a contact I had made. And then it was, I think, George Ferguson as mayor, his first annual address at Bristol Uni. And I went along and I bumped into that councillor who had supported me and the people with the project for the mural. And he was also with the Green mayoral candidate, Tony Dyer.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I met Tony. And got on with him straight away. You know, working class background, but an incredible career with, you know, spanning many different fronts. And obviously an active Green Party member. And he encouraged me at that moment to consider standing for election. And it hadn't been something I'd considered before. I was very disappointed at that time, as were many members of my community, because, as I said, Carnival was cancelled.
Yeah.
The funding was set to be pulled. Malcolm X Centre was under threat of being repossessed by the council. And it was the first time in that year that myself and other people from the community decided to put questions and statements into full council. We were able to understand and navigate that process in terms of how to do that. And then we went up to the cricket ground. So that was the time when City Hall was being refurbished. So full council was at the City ground. And when we got there, it wasn't a particularly welcoming environment. And looking around at all the councillors, there wasn't one who was of African Caribbean heritage. So that was kind of an alarm bell for me to realise, well, perhaps it's unlikely that all of our interests as a community will be heard or understood because we're not represented. So these were all the factors that kind of pushed me to standing for election.
I remember all of those events back in 2012, and that's, I think, the first time you and I spoke at the time of the St Paul's Carnival being cancelled. Yeah, I know, a long time ago. A long time, I know. And much has happened since then. But here's the interesting thing, and I alluded it to in my introduction, Cleo Lake. If you think of Bristol, you think green. You think of green capital. You think it's a very green city. Yet, I don't wish to be unkind, the Greens have not broken through. 11 councillors of 70 at the moment. The last Green MP candidate, Carla came a poor second in Bristol West, getting half the votes of the candidate. We haven't had a Green mayor. Why haven't the Greens been as successful as they have been shouting, and as people perhaps would have expected them to be in Bristol? What's been the barrier?
Yeah, well, I mean, the previous election, we did go down from 14 to 11.
Yeah.
And that has been building over the years. There was the sort of Corbyn factor that many people were gravitating to in the last, not the last election, but the one before that. And I think the landscape's actually changed now. I think we've actually seen quite a few Labour voters switch over to Green in the past couple of months, particularly so that they can vote in these leadership elections. I think the failure of Greens, and it's not for not wanting to try and not being interested and passionate about it, but it hasn't crossed over into the mainstream. The movement hasn't done enough to engage with working class communities and, to an extent, people of colour. That is shifting because I'm also part of Dreams of Colour, and I've recently became a Southwest officer, and our membership is always increasing, and we're doing really, really well on social media and the events that we've held.
Hasn't that
actually is shifting?
Hasn't that actually been the problem, Clear Lake? That you are unusual as a Green, except of course what you've just described about how you grew up and your family grew up. That the Greens in of themselves, it's all a bit sourdough and worried about grains and sandals. It hasn't appealed to South Bristol. It hasn't appealed to places like Southmead or Hartcliffe or Withywood. It's not relevant to them because they've got other issues that are really important, like actually putting a loaf of bread on the table.
This is the challenge, and as I always say, there's no chance in mitigating the climate emergency if we do not address the poverty emergency, the inequality emergency, and inequity emergency. This has to be at the forefront. And Greens, we are standing on a platform of social and environmental justice, and my campaign is all about social, economic and environmental justice. And I'm really trying to drive that message. And I think outreach is entirely necessary. And part of my campaign and part of what I will do, should I be successful in this campaign, is to link with trade unions. We do have a trade union officer. I haven't yet been able to scrutinise how successful they have been in that role. And that role is up for votes now, but that to me is going to be a key area in terms of how we get our messaging out there and how we actually support different people who are struggling in this environment, whether it's the gig economy or whether it's the education system. There are so many things that need to be reformed, and I wholeheartedly believe the Green Party do have the policies that will be in favour for the people, but it's about having that obvious representation in the leadership so people can be confident that we are the party for the people.
Okay. You are standing for deputy leader of the party. I mean, again, I don't wish to be unkind, but the Greens do tend to seem to go through leadership quite quickly, don't they? I can think of one, every 2 years. And I suppose ultimately, and we'll take a pause for Aloe Black, and then we'll come back and talk about some other issues. This is about continuity, isn't it? And this is about direction and purpose. That being Green, Cleo Lake, is seen by many to be something that is an aspiration rather than a set of ideals. That we want to be green to be better. We want to be green to protect the environment, to perhaps look after things for the future. It hasn't been a solid political set of ideals.
Well,
is that what you're trying to change?
Yeah, it's not a lifestyle movement. Okay, lifestyle comes into it, but it's a political party. It's not a lifestyle movement. And we have policies such as a citizen's income, a universal basic income, which guarantees everyone to have something coming in. You know, it doesn't have to be means tested and all of this stuff and all the bureaucracy. It's about supporting people. It's about looking towards things like rent caps. It's about the working person. It's about the ability to actually live and thrive and it not just be a battle to pay your bills, but you actually have time, and well-being is at the forefront of that. So it is about reshaping how we go forward in our quest to regain our humanity, really, our empathy, our caring for ourselves and our planet. We need human and planetary repairs urgently. We have to overturn the conditions that we've all been subjected to, the majority of us, for generations and decades. We need fairness, we need equality, we need economic and social justice.
Okay, well, let's take a pause for Aloe Black. We'll talk more about some of the other campaigns, because there's quite a few of them, Cleo, as you know. We'll talk some about other campaigns and obviously recent events in your home city, our home city of Bristol. Cleo Lake, more from her after Aloe Black.
I've been sad, I've been lost, I've been down and out and lonely. Yeah, I've been suffering at a job in a world that tries to own me. But when I wake up every morning, there's an image of a better place. Yeah, 'cause the harder that we grind, then the sweeter is the glory. People say I'm foolish. People say I'm blinded by faith. But if I run out of air, if I crash, I don't care. I'm gonna do it my way. I can make it through this. You can throw the world in my face. But the fear gives me life, and I swear till I die, I'm gonna do it my way. Hey, gonna do it my way. Hey, gonna do it my way. So put me down, criticize me with your lies and with your parody. Yeah. In the darkness I don't hide, 'cause I got pride that gives me clarity. I still wake up in the morning with the vision of a better life. See, the option of defeat's just not written in my story. People say I'm foolish. People say I'm blinded by faith. But if I run out of air, if I crash, I don't care. I'm gonna do it my way. I can make it through this. You can throw the world in my face. But the fear gives me life, and I swear till I die, I'm gonna do it my way. Hey, gonna do it my way. Hey, gonna do it my way. Every time they build a wall around me, I will tear it down and say I'ma live my dream. Gotta live my dream. Even when the floods rush round to drown me, I just hold my breath and pray, let me live my dream. Every single one of my, I ain't quitting none of my dreams. People say I'm foolish. People say I'm blinded by faith. But if I run out of air, if I crash, I don't care. I'm gonna do it my way. I can make it through this. You can throw the world in my face. But the fear gives me life, and I swear till I die, I'm gonna do it my way. Let me fly through the air, if I crash, I don't care. I'm gonna do it my way. 'Cause the fear gives me life, and I swear till I die, I'm gonna do it my way.
Hello, Black, and My Way. Still time for you to make a request for today's 3 to 1. You may get played. I mean, you won't get played if you ask for Remember You're a Womble, because that's not happening. Or Shut Up Your Face by Joe Dolce. That's not happening either. You may get played today if you ask for a record that makes you turn the radio up, or you end up on the long list and you get played tomorrow or Wednesday. But if you don't make a request, you will end up listening to somebody else's song, and then you only have yourself to play. So call for free, 08000 855 949 to get your request played at around about 12:45 as part of today's 3 to 1. Still with me is Cllr Cleo Lake. Cleo was also a former Lord Mayor of Bristol, a title you weren't particularly happy with, Cleo.
Wasn't I?
No, apparently you wanted to be the People's Mayor, not the title of Lord Mayor.
I think in my actions, I feel as though I was the people's mayor. And yeah, you know, what's wrong with making a suggestion on your way in?
Well, you've made quite a few suggestions on your way in. I mean, we've got lots of them to talk about over the next 5-6 minutes or so. But I just want to pull back a minute, because I want to know where this comes from. Where does this come from? This passion, the passion when you see something to do something about it. Because a lot of us see things that we're not happy with.
Yeah.
But for better or for worse, we don't take the action. We rely on others to take the action. Yeah. And I suppose you could say that really has manifested itself in what happened back in May. That, you know, if leaders don't act, the people will get frustrated, and then the people will act. And that we've seen that throughout history. Where does your action come from?
Well, if I can just say as well, I think the next phase of what I want to do is really demystify the political process. As I said earlier, of how I got into formal politics by going to full council and putting a statement and a question in because I was unhappy about something. I really want to make people understand how to do it because it isn't that obvious and it isn't accessible. And I think we need to break down all of these things so that more people feel empowered and able to have their say. But personally, from my background, it really started as a child. I believe I was fortunate to have attended Eastern Road Primary School, where I had fantastic teachers, which also the learning was reinforced at home from my mum, who was a dedicated mum. She was a stay-at-home mum, a single mum, but she really did give her time and energy into education. And also, you know, taking us on demonstrations from a very young age, so that we had an awareness that things in the world weren't the best way that they could be, and that you do have a voice, and that sometimes you need to get out there and say that something is wrong and call something what it is and try to force change, I guess. So I remember, you know, in the 80s, being a small child and doing the marches through St. Paul's for various different causes. I think there were still, you know, remnants of apartheid in South Africa. There were still trade issues. There was the asylum bill. There was always anti-fascist movement. All of these marches I would take part in. And equally at school, we knew things like the ozone layer was under threat. If we all think back, we can remember that time in the 80s when that was news.
Yeah.
So that kind of environmental aspect was with me from then. And then, you know, my mum dressing me in a T-shirt such as saying, kids are people too, and always having that ability to speak up when I saw something that was wrong.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you might mention fridges there, of course. That led to a will to change, and we changed our fridges. That we knew what was the cause, and we acted, and we did it, didn't we? So education, and again, so many different campaigns, but education is something that, when I looked at your background, Cleo Lake, it seems to be at the heart of everything.
Yeah, I guess it was. You know, I went on to attend Colston Girls and by and large really enjoyed most of my academic career. I've always been that way inclined, really. And I have taught for City of Bristol College and other forums in community settings. I've taught dance for a number of years, more recently, because a lot of people are talking about things like, I hate to use some of these buzzwords, but decolonising the curriculum. And I say I hate to use, I mean, it's not that I hate to use, but I think language is really important, and making language accessible and saying what you mean, changing the curriculum to have a worldview and a holistic approach is important. A lot of people
not a white imperialist European view.
I think it needs to be a balance of different histories. Yeah. But, and, you know, people talking about it. We have the Bristol One curriculum that is being revived, and it's been a long time on the boil, and I just hope it's ready to go in September. I know Cargo's education project will be ready for September, but I, again, have not waited. Just finished a 7-week or 6 or 7 week pilot, which was an online 2-hour school every week called School of IE, where I had 8 different children aged between 8 and 10, and we went through some of Bristol history. We looked at different cultures around the world. We looked at activism. We studied words. We wrote. We did poetry. We did collages. It's about doing the action, not talking. A lot of us are tired of the talking. We know the issues. Now it's about the action.
Well, that's interesting. And here we are, 12:30. We've been speaking for about 20 minutes, and we haven't talked about the statue, and we haven't talked about that particular moment in Bristol's history. We haven't talked about you taking down the statue, the picture, I should say, of Colston from the mayor's parlour and putting up a local artist's picture of a lion within a month of you becoming Lord Mayor. We haven't talked about any of that. And there's a reason we haven't talked about that, because I wanted to hear you, not the issues. Okay. But the issues are important to you, aren't they? And do you think that there's now a tipping point in Bristol that those who walked past that statue, who knew the name but didn't know the history, and that's not their fault, that now we know more, that there is a hunger to know more, and perhaps we will see a change the like of which we have not seen before.
I think it is an interesting time, but I can reflect again from my own experience where I was the gallery assistant at the museum in 1999, one of my first salaried jobs really, and that was for the exhibition A Respectable Trade, with a question mark, Bristol and Transatlantic Slavery. And that was a very well attended exhibition. I was there nearly every day as an assistant, and the amount of Bristolians who came through the doors and from further afield, and it was really interesting to be able to dialogue with people of different generations from Bristol, and so many white Bristolians saying, we didn't know this, and they actually were quite angry that they didn't know the extent of enslavement. They hadn't been told about it. And it was a real turning point, but I think that energy was quickly lost, actually, and that the follow-up work and the legacy of that, other than just being a kind of corner and small section in M Shed, there hasn't been enough that has been done. And I think what is appealing to me at the moment is people will know me for speaking up particularly about racial justice and for perhaps the African Caribbean, the black community. Obviously, I'm part of the reparations movement, but I want people to also understand that I'm for humanity. I'm for the poorer people in society. I'm for all the marginalised people who do not enjoy, who cannot thrive because they're oppressed, whether they understand that they're oppressed or not. And moving forward, I really want to take a mission forward of being a bridge and actually appealing to other communities who may have different views to me.
And isn't that the heart
we
of
should
that?
be allies.
Isn't that the heart of this, Cleo? That if it remains in its silos, as it has on and off throughout history, those silos will ultimately, the doors will shut and the silo will remain. That for those who don't understand but now get it, but think, hang on a minute, what's this actually got to do with me? How can I be part of making things better?
Yeah.
But I'm white and I haven't got a lot of money and I live in Hartcliffe. That has to be the heart of this, doesn't it? It has to be the heart of this.
It has to be the heart of it. It has to be the heart of it, because guess what? I'm imagining that kind of demographic is potentially the majority of our country, of England and Wales. The people who do not have social mobility or are not economically empowered. I'm not saying they're not happy. They may well be happy, but are they enjoying the type of quality of life that they deserve? And I'm guessing some of them aren't. And these would be the majority.
And they probably don't give a stuff about a statue either, do they? I mean, that's the reality. They know the issue now.
They've got more to focus on, but it's also trying to understand where our histories collide and where oppression has existed for people of all backgrounds and certain backgrounds. Remembering that people like Colston himself, he did not support every poor person. You had to be the right kind of, in inverted commas, deserving poor. And for me, I've had letters and I've had bits on social media reminding me about the Irish slave trade and how, when I became Lord Mayor, I went to the Bristol Records Office and they pulled out some items for me, one of which was the 1671 journal of Bristolians sent to foreign plantations. Let's have a look at that history. Let's see what exists today as part of that legacy. Let's find our common ground, which I hope is to topple this whole system that keeps us in work, keeps us in elements of oppression and divided and fighting against each other when we should be allies.
Last question, Cleo. What do you do to relax?
I love dancing. I've just finished at 1 minute to 12 my elders' online Zoom dance class, which is great.
wish I'd known I could watch that during the last half of the previous hour. Good luck with the campaign to be deputy leader of the UK Green Party.
It's England and Wales.
England, I beg your pardon, England and Wales. If you got that, would you remain a councillor?
I would remain a councillor. There's a few months left, and I'd very much be working with you to support me and for me to support them. So shadowing roles would be extremely important to me.
Okay. Well, good luck with it, Cleo. Good to talk
Thank
to
you
you.
very mumuch.
Councillor Cleo Lake, who is campaigning to be deputy leader of the Green Party in England and Wales. Cleo, thank you very much for your time. Cleo Lake there. Really interesting actually to get to know the voice of Cleo Lake as opposed to the noise of Cleo Lake. Thank you, Cleo.
BBC Radio Bristol.